Hi there, and thank you for joining us. Today I'm quite excited to be looking at what I'm hoping is going to be a rich, full throttle, turbocharged Australian Shiraz from the Barossa Valley. So South Australia, and the winery in question is Torbreck, and the wine is their Woodcutter's Shiraz. It's the 2017 vintage of that. Torbreck was a winery that rose to prominence incredibly quickly, actually. Founded in 1994 by Scotsman David Powell, and Dave took the approach of working with growers with whom he had to work really closely with sharecropping, but he found some fantastic old vineyards in the Barossa Valley in all the sort of classic regions, and so just ended up harvesting some fabulous fruit, and was very skilled at making them into wines that preserve that fruit into the glass, into the bottle. And so his top wines, Runrig, and then later on the Laird, really gained some appreciation from the critics. There were some scores in the very high 90s, very regularly for those. And I mean, for instance, Runrig, I think, comes off vineyards that are somewhere between 150, 160 years old. So it's not surprising that Runrig and often the Laird are some of the most expensive wines in Australia these days. This is a slightly cheaper wine, a more introductory wine. So the Woodcutter Shiraz is actually a blend from various subregions, but you read through the subregions and there are places like Grenache, Marananga, Ebenezer, Lydnoch. So the classic places for producing top quality Shiraz in the Barossa, and from vines evidently sort of 40 to 50 years old. So what an old vine is doing is it sets a smaller crop, therefore it ripens the smaller crop better than it would a larger crop, and you get more concentrated fruit from an old vine. And Dave had this skill of finding and negotiating to use these old vineyards, to the extent that he was able to, in many cases, he was able to buy them, and thus, despite the fact that he's not actually involved with the estate anymore, it is able to carry on and produce these fabulous wines because they still have access to these marvellous vineyards. Yes, he lost control of the company in 2003 and stayed on working there and producing the wines until 2013, but is now running his own winery and is not involved in the business anymore, unfortunately. So yeah, generally wines made from, as I say, Shiraz, sometimes with a little Viognier blended in, but in making wines in a sort of Rhône style, sometimes also with Grenache or Mourvedre in the blends as well. Wines with sort of big, rich fruit, high alcohol, plenty of flavour, very sort of typically modern Barossa wines. So let's have a look at this one, shall we? Firstly, colour, a lovely, rich. It's ruby red. There are slight purple hints to it, but it's 2017 wine, so it's 5 years old now, coming up 6 years, and it's lost that sort of purple hue it might have had to its rim, but it still has a vibrancy in its colour. As I swirl it in the glass, you'll see quite heavy tears flowing. I'm not sure how easy it is to see, but there are some quite heavy tears flowing there. That'll be as a result of two things. Firstly, the wine is described on the label as having 15% alcohol, so it's a powerful wine there. And I'm assuming it will have plenty of extract, plenty of tannins in there, to make sure it's a powerful, full-bodied wine. So let's talk about the aromas. Smelling that, the aromas are rich and ripe, and they are they're a dark, slightly jammy prune note at first, and then on to a more sort of dark prune, bullace, damson, those sort of darker stone fruit notes there. But also there's a savoury side to it as well, slightly meaty, and then perhaps some slightly peppery spice and a touch of, it seems as if there's a touch of cinnamon there, and yet oak-wise, which would be what I'd expect the cinnamon spices to come from, this hasn't spent time in new oak. It ages for a year in oak, larger oak, so hogsheads and foudre, and all sort of seasoned French oak. So trying really to cut back on the oak to allow this wonderful fruit to shine through on the nose and the palate. But yeah, possibly it's the peppery hints that I'm getting, but maybe a touch of cinnamon. But a powerful nose, a complex nose, but a harmonious combination of those ripe and savoury elements. So let's taste it. That's a rich, full-bodied wine. There's a wonderful sort of velvety texture. There are plenty of tannins, but they're not astringent. They're rounded, they're smooth, they're ripe. As I say, velvety, getting onto an almost sort of chocolatey smoothness. I might even sort of say there's a sort of a slightly milky smoothness as well to it, although that's becoming sort of juicy fruit as it opens. And the fruit is going through stages. It's overlaid with a sort of with savoury notes and spice, but you start off again with that sort of, as with the nose, that sort of red plum going to a darker plum, dams and bullace, and then actually at the core you're kind of moving on to a more savoury black olive, dark licorice note, which is a little bit sort of still tight and impenetrable. And then at the finish, it's starting to open again and show a little more sort of juicy red fruit. A couple of things there. The acidity doesn't stand out particularly. It must be there because the fruit has a lovely freshness, and it wouldn't have the length and the lovely sort of red plum fruit that's reoccurring on the finish if it didn't have pretty good acidity. But also the alcohol, I mean, I've told you this is 15% alcohol, but it's not got a hot finish at all, because the power of the fruit, the weight of and richness of that fruit is stopping that from being out of balance. It's enabling it to be harmoniously in there and to add to the body of the wine. The flavours are lasting well. There's a lovely complexity and harmony to the wine. It's got an ease and an authority that from its denseness, it's good fruit in there. So yeah, well worth a try. Well worth trying Torbreck's wines. So the Woodcutter Shiraz 2017. Thank you for watching. Do join us again. Bye now.